Assalamu alaikum. Hi guys, this is Sarah. Today we're going to be talking about 10 tips for new converts to Islam. So these are kind of going to be a mix of tips or like helpful information for you. I kind of collected these tips from experiences that I've had as a convert. I converted to Islam back in 2010. I officially took my Shahada in 2011, but I've been Muslim since 2010. And so I've kind of been around the block for a while, and these are kind of some of the tips that I thought of for now. These don't necessarily only apply to new Muslims, but I think that they're the most helpful for new Muslims. So the first thing that applies to new Muslims, but also kind of applies to everybody, is to approach learning about Islam with care. So I know that everybody jokes about Sheikh Google, but it's true. Sheikh Google is not your friend. Google does not have all the answers for you. The internet is a very helpful tool to be able to learn about Islam, but you need to be really careful about what sources you're using. So just keep in mind that a lot of these pieces, articles, different things like that explain certain things about Islam are written by people. And the only thing that is a 100% reliable, surefire thing is the Quran. So even English translations of the Quran can be really unreliable. Because certain translators may have motives behind the way that they translate. I had an English version of the Quran that was very misleading because it would use footnotes or parentheses to explain certain verses, even though those things weren't actually written in the Quran, weren't an actual translation, because they were trying to explain the verses, but that's not what they actually meant. So it's important to get a good translation of the English Quran. I have two favorites. One of my favorite English translations of the Quran was published, I believe, in Texas, and the other one is a children's kind of explanation and version of the Quran, like an English translation. They're very good tools because even though they're not the Arabic version, they're very accurate and don't go very much into explanations that are off from what the original translations are. So those are really good. But that kind of is, and I'll link to those two below where you can buy those if you're interested. But once again, kind of coming back to what we were originally talking about, approach things with care, kind of see what interpretive background the person who's writing is coming from in order to kind of get an idea of what you're looking at. And of course, there are also websites that disguise themselves as being Islamic information sites that are actually anti-Muslim sites. So again, approach with care. So the second thing that kind of goes off of that research and learning line, so the second tip is that hadiths are not absolute. So I know that there's a bunch of people who right now are going to go, oh my god, but you have to follow the hadith. Yeah, so the hadith is really important in Islamic tradition. For those of you who don't know, maybe some of my very brand new Muslims here, hadiths are sayings of the Prophet or traditions of the Prophet that have been told to other people and passed down over time. So people like to talk about hadith science, meaning studying what the lines of passing down hadith are, like who told it to who and whether that person was trustworthy and that kind of thing. Hadith science is not exact, of course. It's not an exact science, and you need to be careful about what kind of hadiths you're reading about and which ones you're trusting. Even if it's in Sahih Bukhari, you can't necessarily trust that those things are going to be absolute. You need to do the research for yourself. Those are very well-trusted collections of hadith, but at the same time, you need to use a certain amount of research and logic when you're looking into hadiths. I know that when I first converted to Islam, I would scare myself a lot because I'd read about these random hadiths that weren't even true, that basically people pulled out of nowhere to convince others of their version of Islam. So just be careful about what hadiths you're reading. Use your logic, use what else you know about Islam to kind of check that and do your research, because you may find that that's not really something that you have to do or follow because it's not a trustworthy hadith. So my third tip is don't stress yourself out about what you don't know yet. You have plenty of time to learn. A lot of people feel really stressed out because they're like, oh, I don't know this. Am I practicing Islam properly? That kind of thing. You don't have to worry about that now. You're a brand new baby Muslim, as I like to say. And you are learning the same as other people had to learn to essentially become Muslim. They had to learn the steps and the things that they're supposed to do. You are in your learning stage right now, and you don't need to beat yourself up over things that you don't know. I had a really hard time learning how to do Salah, and I felt so guilty about that because I felt that there was a lot of resources out there that just didn't make sense, that I couldn't really follow easily, and I had a hard time learning until somebody actually showed me, and I felt really guilty about that I was probably Muslim already for like maybe a year or two before I learned how to do Salah. So don't feel guilty about those things that you don't know yet. Try your best to learn, and in time those things are going to come and they'll be easier to you. To kind of give you a perspective, the Sahaba and the earliest Muslims, they were revealed, the Quran was revealed to the Prophet in stages. They didn't just have everything, all the rules at once and go, okay, be Muslim. There was an adjustment period. They had to learn to be Muslim. So the revelations came over a long period of years. So they didn't have to immediately adjust to things. And you're not expected to immediately adjust to things either. If there's some things that you consider easier than others and you want to just do those right away, that's great for you. But if you need to take that adjustment period and you need to spend time learning more and putting those practices into your everyday life, that's completely fine, and you shouldn't feel guilty about it. So my fourth tip is also related to Salah, how I was talking about before. So have somebody either show you how to do Salah or use a children's guide to Salah. I know that this is something that a lot of people, I've heard from other convert groups and forums and stuff like that, have a hard time learning about because usually these guides to Salah are coming from people who are born Muslims, who don't have the perspective of not knowing the language, that don't really have, access to following other people and seeing how they do it and that kind of thing. So it's very confusing for us. When you have somebody show you how to do Salah, they can correct your mistakes, they can help you with the pronunciation, all those kind of things. Additionally, if you don't have that opportunity to have somebody teach you Salah, then I would recommend trying to use a children's guide to learn Salah. Usually children's guides, I kind of mentioned this before with English translations of the Quran, so usually materials that are targeted towards children are broken down a lot more, so it'll be easier for you to understand using one of those. If I can find a good children's guide, I will also link that down below in the description. Also too, future video, I plan on doing a Salah guide, so stay tuned for that coming up. Also, next tip, be prepared for the way people will treat you. This is a really big one, and it's almost, you hear people talking about it when they talk about converting to Islam, the hard time they've had with adjusting to the way that people treat them, but it's another thing experiencing it for yourself. And in this specific sense, I'm talking about friends, family, co-workers. Especially if you're visibly Muslim, you'll have a much harsher reaction. So some of my older viewers to my channel know about how much of a hard time I had with my family accepting me converting. I essentially lost my family. I lost friends. My family has kind of come back around, but for a long time things were really hard, and it's still not an area of unity for us. So just understand that you probably are going to struggle with people that you already have in your life, and there's a lot of things that you can do to deal with that, to kind of make your struggles easier, but just know that that's going to be something that you're going to have to deal with. It's probably something you're going to have to deal with your whole life, and over time you are going to learn how to handle those kind of things better. It's really difficult at first to be treated differently by the people that you love, but over time you will learn how to handle those situations better. On the same note, try your best to be patient with born Muslims who may have good intentions but don't really realize what you're going through. Sometimes people think that they're being helpful in some way, saying some things to you, or maybe they are giving you unsolicited advice. Don't feel pressured by born Muslims to practice Islam how they think you should practice Islam. Do your research, take your time, learn. Not everybody has the same interpretation of how Islam should be practiced. I kind of look at it as a pendulum. There's a lot of different interpretations within this pendulum. There's people who are kind of on the more lax side and people who are on the more strict side, and there's a whole number of interpretations in between that. Interpretations that are very much valid. So don't let other people pressure you into practicing Islam in a way that you don't want to. Also, too, you may get some really insensitive comments from born Muslims who don't really understand what you're going through or don't really understand your story. Try your best to just be patient with them and understand that they really don't know where you're coming from. You may feel disappointed in how the community acts, but that's also kind of something that you'll learn to deal with over time. So my next tip, kind of going off of that again, is that the Muslim community is not perfect, and do not assume it is, otherwise you're going to be severely disappointed. So the Muslim community is made up of people. That's the bottom line. People are not a walking, talking version of the Quran. They're not a walking, talking version of what your interpretation of Islam is. And for a lot of other converts, I've heard this over and over and over again, and I have also experienced this. It's really disappointing to have this idealistic version of what you think Islam is and what you think the Muslim community is, and then you see the Muslim community acting in a completely different way. I mean, that's to say that the Muslim community is made up of people and that they don't necessarily act how they should. That's not an excuse. That's not an excuse for their behavior. But what it is kind of something to kind of bring us down to earth and go, okay, these rules and these ways that we're supposed to act are the ideal, and we're given these rules and things like that because God knows that we're not going to act like that necessarily. I mean, we can do our best to follow things, but God knows that it may be not in our nature to follow all of these rules or to treat other people the way that they really should be treated. And so the Muslim community, like a lot of other communities, isn't perfect. So I would say try to keep your expectations realistic. Do your best to reach out to other people in the Muslim community. Go for it. Get friends. Do whatever, you feel is right. But just realize that your community may not be the ideal Muslim community. And Muslim communities are different all across the country. Wherever you live, they're very different. So realize that, find other ways to connect to your community online, however, and try your best to once again be patient with them. Tip number 8, you are not a bad Muslim if you make mistakes. I have really beat myself up before about mistakes that I've made, especially more before in the past. When I was a new Muslim, about mistakes that I would make, like if there was pork in something and I didn't know that it was in there, I'd feel really bad about it. But all of those kind of things you really don't have to feel bad about, even if it's a mistake that is so I gave an example of an unintentional mistake. If something is intentional, that you did it and now you've already done it, it's over, it's done. God is supposed to be the most merciful. If you ask for forgiveness and you make steps in order to not do that mistake again, that's all you really need to do. It's not something that you need to think about forever, even if we make these mistakes over and over and over again. If our intention is to get better, that's not something that's necessarily, I don't want to say bad, because I mean, it's not good necessarily to sin, but it's not something that you should be beating yourself up for if you're striving and trying to get closer to doing better in your life. And everybody makes mistakes. It's not just something that's exclusive to converts. The Muslim community is full of people who do not so great things, whether it's really big mistakes or really little mistakes. It's not something that you need to be beating yourself up about and going, oh, I'm such a bad Muslim, I'm such a bad Muslim. A lot of these things will become easier in time. So that's also kind of related to this, that a lot of people experience dips in their iman or dips in their faith, and that's completely normal, and it's not something that you should be scared about. Everybody has challenges of faith and struggles and different things like that. What is helpful for me is reflecting on the reasons why I became Muslim. Why is Islam an attractive religion to me? What is it about Islam that speaks to me? Because it can feel very overwhelming when you're going through problems with your family, with your friends, with work, with your whole life, because it can affect a lot of areas of your life. It's difficult when you're going through all of those problems to see, like, wow, I'm going through all of this basically just because I'm Muslim. It helps to go back and go, why am I Muslim? Why did this religion appeal to me in the first place? And so is there a reason also too for your dip in iman? Your dip in iman. If there is a specific reason, address that struggle. Why is that struggle making you feel this way? So for me, I felt that my biggest dips in faith were when my family was treating me so badly. I felt like I'm struggling this much and I don't really feel what is coming out of this. I mean, over time things change and all that, but when realizing what my struggles were, that kind of helped me to identify why I was having these issues. Also, too, just kind of a daily thing that kind of helps to kind of strengthen your faith a little bit is remembrance of God. So remembering the blessings in your life, remembering the things that you've been given as opposed maybe to the negative aspects of your life is really helpful. So my last tip is to connect with other converts, whether this is online, if you have converts in your community, connect with other converts. They understand your struggles. They may even have the same background as you or come from the same places. You're going to find a companionship that you may not find in other Muslims in the Muslim community when you connect with other converts. You're connecting with other people who may feel the same amount of isolation as you do, who may feel the same hurt and things like that. It's a support system that's honestly really valuable. Through figuring out how other converts struggled and what they felt, it really helped me to identify things in myself as well that I was struggling with, and to kind of feel like I wasn't alone, because being a convert can be a very lonely and isolating experience. So when you reach out to other people, it kind of is helpful, it's supportive, and you're no longer alone. So thank you guys, and if any of you are converts, whether new or old, and you thought that maybe I missed some tips, let me know in the comments below what one of your tips to new Muslims or new converts would be. Maybe I'll do a part 2 of this video based on your suggestions. So thank you guys for listening today, and I really appreciate you watching my videos. Please subscribe if you like these videos, like, comment on what you would like to see from me in the future. So thank you guys, and assalamu alaikum.